The Dentalpreneur Podcast. Okay, doctor, it's time to put down that handpiece. You're listening to the show dedicated to helping dentists get their lives back. It's time to decrease your stress, increase your profitability, and regain your passion. Now introducing your host, Dr. Mark Costas.
Welcome to the podcast. This episode is being sponsored by my book, Pillars of Dental Success: Systems and Strategies to Streamline the Marketing and Management of the Modern Dental Practice. If you'd like a free copy, just visit my website at truedentalsuccess.com. That's truedentalsuccess.com. And while you're there, feel free to pick up my free video entitled Cracking the Top 1%, which is a live keynote presentation that I gave on practice systemization and overhead control. Two great resources completely for free for the listeners of this podcast. Now, on to the show. Hey everyone, Dr. Mark Costas here. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. And I'm super excited today to welcome our featured guest. Some know him as the dental embezzlement guru. His name is David Harris, and he's joining us from Canada today. David is the world's leading expert on dental office embezzlement. He's also the CEO of Prosperident, which is the world's largest dental embezzlement firm. He is a certified fraud examiner. He is a licensed private investigator. He has a graduate degree in applied business mathematics, and he is a very highly regarded and sought after national and international speaker. So David, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're a very, very busy guy with a lot going on. So we're thrilled to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
I just kind of gave the 10,000 foot view of your background. Is there anything that I missed or you'd like to add about what's new with you and your business these days?
Well, sometimes I get asked what gives me joy in life, and the perverse answer is I really like hearing the cell door slam shut on an embezzler.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, and with that, you've had a great amount of experience watching that over your years doing this?
Well, unfortunately, more of them probably escape that fate than should, but enough of them get to go to jail that at least we get to experience that little bit of joy sometimes.
Yeah, I don't want to get too derailed here, but do you think that, most people get into, say, the dental arena really intending to defraud their boss, or do you think that something comes up where they see an opportunity, they just kind of pounce on it?
That's an excellent question. The thieves kind of fall into two categories. And one category I would refer to as serial embezzlers. And these people move from practice to practice, and they steal pretty much from every practice until they get caught, and then they get fired and go and find a way to conceal their background and get hired somewhere else and steal there. Mm-hmm. So that's one group. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what the dental community focuses on more than the other group. The second group are people who work for a dental office for a long time, and I'm typically talking 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. And then one morning they wake up and start stealing. And they have no checkered past, no criminal record, no background of any type involving stealing. They just kind of, as I say, wake up one morning and decide that today's the day I'm going to steal from my doctor.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I don't know if you know anything about my background, David, but I've had 6 dental practices, and many of the front office people, the people that handle money, have come and gone, and sometimes, it doesn't feel like things are squaring up as far as the finances and the cash flow at the end of the month. But as you know, because you've worked with so many dentists in the past, a lot of times dentists just, they put their head down and they kind of ignore it, or they just don't notice it for months or years, and then are just completely lost. They have no idea how to go about even reconciling what has happened. So I guess that's kind of where your company would come in.
That's exactly where we come in. And it's tough, Mark, because almost invariably the thief is the most trusted employee in the office.
Oh, yes.
If we told the dentist to line the staff up against the wall and pick the one least likely to be the embezzler, that's probably the embezzler. And part of what contributes to their success is that blind, unwavering trust that the dentist has in them. And that's really what allows them to ply their trade as an embezzler.
Wow. Yeah. I get chills when you say that, because several pictures of people in my past and past employees kind of flash in front of my eyes. And boy, that is, it's true, because I think so many dentists are inept as far as, their business background. And that's because, there's so much to learn in a short period of time when you're going through dental school and preclinical stuff. We have to really kind of hone our attention to one thing. And typically that's clinical skill. And so many other things get kind of thrown to the wayside. And we do have a tendency, I think, as a profession to really place a lot of blind trust in those that surround us. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of people that have just kind of been brokenhearted when they found out that a certain trusted individual, a person they thought was, more like family or a friend than an employee, really takes advantage of them.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Dentistry depends on delegation, both in terms of clinical production and administrative functioning as well. I mean, no dentist can function without support staff of both types.
Absolutely.
And that's what creates the opportunity, along with some other things. For example, dentistry is one of the few businesses I can think of where, in a lot of cases, 80% of the cost of work is paid by a third party who's not present when the work is done.
Right.
So that creates an instability, but dentistry is just a place that's very ripe for embezzlement, and the number of dentists who are struck by it is simply a reflection of the situation. It's not really caused by the failings on the part of the dentist, And when we talk to dentists who've been embezzlement victims, the first thing they want to do is internalize. They want to blame themselves. If only I had spent more time running my practice and less time getting better at my clinical craft. If only this wouldn't have happened. And we have to say to them, look, there's nothing you could have done that would have changed the outcome.
Right. So, I got so excited when we started this interview, David, because this is such an interesting and compelling topic to me. But let's back up just a little bit. And, I'm really curious to find out, this is a very, very specific, niche and sub-niche, super duper sub-niched area that you've chosen to focus on for your career. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you ended up serving dentists in this capacity?
Absolutely. And you're right. It is a narrow niche. And just so your readers or listeners understand, Mark, we only deal with dentists. We don't investigate, medical office theft or corner stores or anything else. Dentistry's it. Mm-hmm. And all of my investigators have a very strong dental background, and they understand how dental offices work and the type of practice management software that's in use and so on. So we're a dental company through and through. Mm-hmm. As to how I got here, it was a complete accident. And we're going back now roughly 25 years. In 1989, I was sitting at home. I'd left my job as an investigator working for a bank. And I was kind of thinking about what I was going to do next. And I got a phone call one day from a friend of mine who, by sheer coincidence, was a dentist. And he said to me, I think my receptionist is stealing from me. And you're the only guy I can think of to go to with this. And of course, this predates the internet, and he couldn't go on Google because it didn't exist yet and search dental office embezzlement or anything. So he just called me. And I said, no problem. I'll come over to your office tonight and we'll get it sorted out. So I met him at his office. We found the embezzlement. And this, of course, was in the days before computers were commonplace. So this doctor was using the old pegboard system. Mm-hmm. And we found what the thief was doing, and I helped him get rid of her, and I went back to watching TV, and I didn't give it another thought until 2 weeks later. And 2 weeks later, I was going into my own dentist's office for a filling. And I was about to go through the front door. And I looked through the glass, and I saw sitting on the other side the same woman who we fired from the other office 2 weeks earlier.
Was she familiar with your face?
She would have recognized me, yeah. And I spun around quickly in hope she didn't see me, and sprinted to the nearest payphone, because the cell phones in those days, sort of were briefcase size instead of pocket size, so I didn't have one. Yeah. So I did the 200-yard dash to a payphone, and of course now my mind was racing, because I knew I had to get past the gatekeeper and speak to the doctor. And I didn't know a whole lot at that point about how dental offices function, but anyway, I had this hunch that if I identified myself as doctor somebody, I'd get put right through. So I knew the name of a local orthodontist, and I just identified myself using his name, and it worked. I was speaking to the doctor. Wow. And I said to him, I'm not Dr. So-and-so, I'm David Harris. I'm supposed to be in your chair right now. Obviously I'm not, but let me tell you why. And I told him about what he had going on at his front desk. And he asked me in panic, what do I do now? And about halfway through answering him, I got hired.
Wow. That is unbelievable. Okay. Now, this is a fascinating story to me. I need to know a little bit more information. You say that you are a licensed private investigator. Did you become a private investigator after you began working with dentists in this capacity, or were you already a private investigator? Because what you did there was very, very sly. That was a sly maneuver in how you were able to contact this dentist and talk to him one-on-one.
Well, no, I became a PI after I started working with dentists. Okay. The part, though, that you probably want to know is what I did before. And in my teens, I was a bit of a lawbreaker.
Okay.
So I kind of lived on the other side of the fence for a little while and got caught, and decided that flying straight was a much better way to live my life, and did. But I spent enough time being a criminal that thinking like one always came naturally to me.
Wow. Yeah. They always say that the best people at doing these types of jobs are somebody that can really get into the minds of the people on the other side. So the fact that you spent some time in your life thinking like the other side, I guess, helps a lot every day.
It does. And funny you should mention that, because when we hire investigators, the single non-negotiable criterion is that they have to be able to think like crooks.
Wow.
And if they can't do that, I don't care what they know about dentistry or dental software. They're useless to us.
Right.
And our investigators have various types of experience. I mean, we have former practicing dentists. We have people who have been consultants, software trainers, former office managers. Interestingly, one of the best investigators we have is a former dental hygienist.
Really?
And
interesting.
You probably wouldn't think of hygiene as being the ideal training ground for an investigator, but she has a background maybe a little bit like mine. And she falls into that criminal thought process as easily as anybody I've ever met.
Wow.
And it makes her just a fantastic investigator.
So how many total investigators do you have now with your firm? It sounds like you guys have grown pretty significantly since your experience several years ago, and you've added many investigators. Where are you guys at right now?
We've got 12 now. We're currently hiring and looking for probably one or two more by the summer of 2014.
Okay.
We are now at the point where we look for very specific skill sets for investigators. Mm-hmm. For example, we have a department that does orthodontic investigation because the software and the business processes in ortho offices are just so different than general dental offices.
Right.
That my generalist investigators were really struggling with doing ortho investigations.
Okay.
So we created a department. And then we also have another group called SI, Special Investigations, and that deals with the really ugly files that we find. For example, in a group practice, one doctor stealing from another is a good one for SI.
Wow. Does that happen often in group practices?
I don't have a percentage to give you. I mean, I couldn't say that it happens in 10% of them or 2%. I really don't know. Okay. But inevitably, we've got 3 or 4 active cases of that type at any one time.
Right. Okay. And it usually, okay, now can we back up just a second? Usually
Sure.
when somebody actually obtains your services, is this usually a hunch, or is this something verified from their CPA that says things just don't add up? Or is it, you know, how does somebody finally get to the point where they type into Google, you know, dental practice embezzlement, they find your firm and then actually put you on retainer or hire you, however you do that? How do most people come to you? I mean, is that a fair question to ask?
Absolutely. We get 3 distinct groups, and one group don't perceive that they're at any kind of elevated risk.
Okay.
But they just want to sleep at night, and they want to know that none of their staff have their hand in the doctor's pocket.
Right. Okay.
So to take a term from your world, Mark, they want a prophylactic investigation.
Okay. Gotcha.
We have a second group who perceive that they're at elevated risk. And there are various ways that perception might arrive. They may see something that concerns them. They may, their CPA or somebody else may flag the fact that they may have a problem. But they haven't found embezzlement yet, but they know that they're in kind of the zone for it.
Okay.
And the third group have already found something, or they came in on a Monday morning and their office manager has done a runner, just didn't show up, no notice, gone and not coming back or something like that. There's some very strong indicator that they've got a problem. Maybe they've even found something themselves that leads them to believe that there's a bigger problem.
Okay, so those are the 3 main groups. Now, how often do you initiate an investigation when the perpetrator or the person that's guilty of embezzling is no longer with the office in cases like that?
Subjectively, because this isn't something we've profiled, but subjectively, in probably 30 to 35% of cases, the suspect is gone, and in the other 65%, they're still on site.
Wow. The vast majority of the time, they're still there, still doing it.
That's right. And that creates some challenges for us that we're quite accustomed to, because we need to do a stealthy investigation.
Right.
And we've spent a lot of time working on our methodology in a way that we can be investigating an office, and the staff working there have no idea what's going on.
That was going to be my next question. You obviously do your very best to conceal the investigation so that nobody is aware of anything that's happening. So this is all done kind of cloak and dagger behind the scenes by studying reports and the software and that sort of thing.
It is. We've worked hard on creating a methodology that we can apply without having to set foot in somebody's office most of the time. We do site visits in only about 5% of the investigations that we do.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So, the old story that you started with, where you walked in and holy cow, this was the person that you had just kind of investigated and busted. That doesn't happen very often now because you guys are doing this all virtually.
Yeah, the chance of my walking into an office and seeing somebody I fired in another office is pretty small.
Okay. That's an important point that you bring up. When you do identify somebody that's doing something wrong, how long down, in the process are they usually fired? And do you do that, or do you have another member of the staff do that, or how do you usually handle that situation?
The answer to the first question is virtually immediate. I mean, when we're holding the smoking gun in our hand, then our immediate recommendation made to the doctor is it's time to terminate this person. Depending on the situation, I mean, we give some level of help with that to doctors, but at the same time, we're not in the HR business. And depending on the situation, we may refer the doctor to outside help for termination. So as you know, there are several great companies who specialize in dental HR, and then you've also got people like attorneys in every state who have some background in this. So depending on the situation, we'll make a referral. You know, if it's an employee who's got 20 years seniority and you know, it's not an employment at will state or something like that, then yes, we definitely want our doctor to get good advice so the termination happens properly and there's no particular blowback from it.
Okay. So I know, David, there's dentists out there that are thinking, wow, this is a really interesting conversation, but I've got nothing to worry about. I know for a fact that my people aren't stealing from me. But can you tell us exactly how prevalent it is? How prevalent is dental embezzlement today? Do you have a firm number?
Well, I'll give you the published statistics and then I'll tell you what I really think.
Okay.
The published statistics, and these come from places like the American Dental Association, suggest that the probability of a dentist being victimized at some point in his or her career ranges between 50 and 60%.
So more than half.
More than half, again, according to the published numbers.
Okay.
The problem is that the published numbers are low. And the reason they're low is, first of all, some embezzlement is never detected at all. In other words, some people get away with this for the duration of their employment with the doctor.
Right.
And some embezzlement is found and the doctor just doesn't do anything about it. So when you factor those two in, and obviously neither of them lends itself to determination. If you ask me what my opinion is, it's probably close to 80%.
Wow.
Dentists will suffer embezzlement at some point in their careers.
And the reason you think that the percentage is that high?
Because that's what we see.
Yeah. Okay.
And no, again, we're dealing with not only unknowns but unknowables. So, you know, there is no conceivable way to quantify the number of dentists who are the victims of embezzlement and don't know it.
Wow.
But I know that number is greater than zero.
Yeah.
And I also have no way of quantifying the number of dentists who are embezzled and choose to express some harm, but I also know that's greater than zero. So
Right.
if you start with the 60% published statistic and you add those two factors on it, realistically, I think you're at about 80%.
Wow. There's been a couple times I've gotten chills during this interview already, David, and I just got chills again. That's really staggering. So, besides hiring your firm, what are some quick and easy steps that the average dentist could take to decrease their chances of being taken advantage of?
That's a good question, and the answer I'm going to give you, Mark, is probably a little different than what most dentists have heard and think about what the answer to that question should be.
Okay.
If you search for dental embezzlement online, you'll find a lot of articles that have a title like 10 things you can do to prevent embezzlement in your practice. And most of these articles are written by people who don't deal with embezzlement every day. They have some other connection with dentistry, but they're not investigators.
Right.
And they'll suggest procedures, controls, separation of duties, things like that. And I want to make sure that your listeners don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that any of those things are a bad idea. However, what they ignore is how thieves think.
Right.
And let's say I'm walking down your street and my plan is to rob your house. And I have that plan because I'm a crack cocaine addict and I need it fixed. Mm-hmm. And I get to your front door, Mark, and either I see the alarm company sticker on your door, or I hear the dog barking, or maybe I see that one that would really stop me in my tracks, which is your NRA life member sticker.
Yep.
I get to your front door and I get the sense that stealing from your house is not going to be the easiest thing I can do. Then what I do next is I move down the street and I find a less defended house and I break in there. Okay, that's how thieves operate in a situation when they can select their target.
Right.
And a little bit of deterrence works really well, because all you have to do to stop me from breaking into your house is convince me that the house down the street is an easier target.
Okay.
And that's the analogy that people have in their mind when they think that, if I put 10 new controls in place, that will control embezzlement in my practice. But there's a difference. Again, with house burglary, I'm mobile. I can target any house I want. So I'm going to target an easy one. On the other hand, if I'm embezzling, there's only one potential target. It's you. What I have control over, and therefore by extension what you can influence, is not my choice of victim, it's my choice of methodology.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if I work for you and I feel the strong need to embezzle, no thief is ever going to say, well, it's just too hard to steal from Dr. Costas, so I'm going to quit at his office. I'll go get another job at a different dental office, and I'll invest the 3 to 5 years it takes to build up enough knowledge and trust to successfully embezzle there.
Right, I see where you're going with this, yeah.
Okay, so if I decide I'm going to do it, and I've got a lot of choices. I mean, there's a porosity in the dental office that thieves can exploit. In other words, you can't block all the holes, and I personally question what blocking 50 of them when there might be 1,000 different ways to steal from you really accomplishes.
Hi everyone, I wanted to take a quick break to let you know a little bit more about our one-on-one and small group coaching programs. The fact that you're listening to this show indicates that you are the kind of dentist, dental specialist, or dental practice owner who gets it. You're the type of individual who is constantly seeking information to try to get every possible edge to improve your business and quality of life. Am I right? Listen, if you're like the vast majority of dental professionals out there, you never got any formal training on the ins and outs of building a wildly successful dental practice. The fact that you've gotten to where you are today demonstrates a very high level of intelligence and grit. But it takes a lot more than intelligence, persistence, and exceptional clinical skill to be successful in business. Nobody expected you to go out and become a gifted clinician without putting the time in, following a rigid curriculum and course of study. So why would it be any different when it comes to the business side of our profession? If you are seriously ready to reach your full potential in practice and in life, our coaching programs may be just the thing you've been searching for. We have program options that are affordable for practitioners at all stages of their career and are completely unlike any of the outdated and ineffective courses that you may have encountered in the past. So if you'd like to learn more about our programs, email me directly at mark@truedentalsuccess.com, mark@truedentalsuccess.com, and I'll send you all the pertinent info. Now back to the show.
So that was the preamble. Now let me answer the question you asked, which is, what can you do about this? What a lot of people don't realize is how much embezzlement is given away, not by some kind of financial inconsistency, but by the behavior of the thief. So when people are stealing from you, they act in a certain way. For example, they're probably reluctant to take vacation. They are pretty territorial about their workspace, their duties. They don't want to cross-train anybody. They don't want to share duties. There are a lot of behavioral indicia of embezzlement. And the American Dental Association did a survey in 2008, and they asked embezzlement victims how they realized that they had a problem. 68% of them said that they realized it because of the way the thief was acting. 32% had some kind of financial giveaway, like day sheets not balancing to bank deposit, or practice profitability not where they thought it should be, or their CPAs thought they had a problem, something like that. So less than 1/3 of embezzlement was uncovered by finances, and more than 2/3 by behavior. So what I want your listeners to take away from this is the best investment that they can make in control of embezzlement is to monitor staff behavior so that they can see if staff are acting like they're stealing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is a fascinating statistic. So,
and again, it's a little different than the advice that most people give on this topic.
Right.
The other thing about behavioral monitoring is that it's a lot easier. I mean, you can spend hours and hours crawling through your audit trail trying to find stuff that looks like embezzlement. And if you have no particular background in looking for it, I mean, it's a very difficult process. On the other hand, you can spend 15 minutes every 3 months thinking about your employee behavior and have a much greater chance of realizing that you have a problem.
Right. That's definitely true. And you know, given the financial and business background that most of us dentists have, you know, when I look at a stack of reports, my mind just kind of goes fuzzy, and I want to just kind of I want to delegate that sort of thing to somebody else. So if somebody really is motivated and they're looking at this stack of reports that go back several months, that's just a dizzying prospect as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I was looking at an audit log not that long ago for a one dentist, one hygienist practice. So, you know, as dental offices go, a kind of fairly modest operation. Mm-hmm. The audit log for 1 year was 1,800 pages.
Oh my goodness gracious! Yeah.
So, you know, if you have nothing better to do than try to plow through that 1,800 pages looking for embezzlement when you're not absolutely sure what it looks like,
right?
I'm not going to discourage you, but I think that for most doctors, there's a better use for their time.
Right, for sure. So let's switch gears a little bit here, David. When you actually take on a case, I know this is probably hugely dependent upon the amount of volume that the practice does, but how long from beginning to an end is your typical case?
Our target time to complete an investigation is 8 weeks. Okay. And we start measuring that from the time when we have all the information we need in order to do the work.
Right.
And sometimes that might take a week or two for us to get from the time somebody contacts us until we're ready to go. Now, I'll be honest, we don't always make our 8-week target, and certainly if there are complications to various types of investigation, it may get protracted. But that's our target, and I'm pleased to say that we're currently meeting it about 70% of the time.
Okay. So what it sounds to me like you build a case, then you gather evidence, and then you kind of determine exactly what happened, and then at some point you determine how much money was lost, and then perhaps is there some sort of a choice whether or not they want to press charges, or how does that whole thing work?
That's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people misunderstand. The justice system is owned by governments, not citizens.
Okay.
So if somebody commits a crime, the first question is it a federal crime or a state crime? Let's assume it's a state crime in California.
Okay.
A citizen doesn't really have the right to, quote, press charges. That's done by the district attorney.
Okay. All right.
Normally in consultation with the police department. So what a citizen's role in this process is typically to make a complaint. And then the police look at it and decide if they have enough evidence to bring it forward to the district attorney, and then the DA looks at it and decides whether it's something that he or she wants to move into the court system. That's what really happens, and the dentist's input into that is limited really to, first of all, opening a file at the police department, and second, communicating their expectations.
Okay.
I'd like to see this person charged is really the most that a doctor can do.
Okay. And typically, what is the recourse, is the punishment if it does end up going to trial, is that based on the amount of loss that was experienced by the business owner?
That's a factor for sure. The biggest determinant probably is where the thief lives. For example, the state of Texas, for reasons I don't necessarily understand, but the state of Texas is much harder on embezzlers than many other states.
Okay.
And judges will really throw the book at embezzlers in Texas compared to other places. And I can only assume that somebody in the justice hierarchy, and maybe it was a governor at some point, simply told the justice system, we take what I call our crime seriously, and our expectation is that you'll you'll punish it properly.
Right.
In other states, they tend to prioritize violent crime more, and white collar criminals tend to get fairly gently punished.
Okay. So, is there ever a case when any of that money is recoverable? Can you garnish somebody's wages in the future for having done harm to you, or is that usually just 100% loss?
Our victims always get something back.
Really? Okay.
The question is how much, and there are really three potential sources of recovery. The first source is that most dentists have some level of employee dishonesty insurance. Normally, it's pretty modest. I mean, the typical default coverage that we see is about $25,000 of coverage.
Okay.
Which, in the magnitude of thefts that we see, is pretty small. And one piece of advice I give to the listeners is to check on their amount of coverage, and if they can increase it to some bigger number, and usually something like about $75,000 is not hard to get.
Okay.
I encourage them to do so.
Okay.
So that insurance is one source of recovery. A second one is the thief, but as I suspect you've concluded already, Mark, most of the people doing this don't have $1 million in the bank, and therefore in general recovery from them is small. And you're absolutely right. It's very common for a judge in a criminal embezzlement situation to give what's called a restitution order. So this is an order to the thief to pay back money, but you also have to expect that their future employment prospects are a little bit dismal. Sure. And they may not be able to make very much money in future, which means that it's unlikely that they'll be able to pay you.
Right.
And then in some cases, there's the possibility of going after a third party. If a thief steals checks payable to you and puts them in their own bank account, for example, then you can go after their bank, and we've had some success with that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So how often are your consultants or your investigators called upon to testify in these trials?
Testifying isn't something that we end up doing a whole lot, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Probably the big one is that we give a fairly complete, thorough report in every investigation that we do, and in most cases, the attorneys doing the prosecution don't see a huge need for us to be there to tell them what's already in the report.
Right.
So in most situations, that does what needs to be done. Plus, typically the police are also gathering their own evidence, and they've got some powers of evidence gathering that we don't have. For example, they can subpoena thieves' bank accounts. So they tend to be the primary carriers of evidence in most criminal matters. Okay. And we testify relatively rarely.
So your reports are typically what's admissible as evidence, and they use that as necessary.
That's right.
Gotcha. Okay, so just a couple more questions here, David. Like I said, I know you're a busy guy, and this has just been an absolutely fascinating interview. And obviously, feel free to tell me if this is a question that you're uncomfortable answering. But can you give us some stories of dentists that have really been taking advantage of? What's the worst case you've ever seen in a monetary amount?
The biggest I've ever seen is right around $2 million.
Over what period of time?
About 5 years.
Wow. Okay. And did the guilty party in that case, did they end up doing jail time?
Yes, they did.
Wow. That's a lot of money. That's life-changing money over the course of just 5 years. Holy mackerel.
It is for both parties.
Right.
When you look at the dentist, I mean, that probably added 3 or 4 years to the date when they could retire.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the biggest we've seen. The typical embezzlement. Last time we profiled it, I think the average embezzlement in our cases at the time was about $109,000.
That's still a huge number.
it's still a big number, and we all understand the time value of money. So if a 35-year-old doctor loses $100,000 in the embezzlement, had they had that money and invested it till their retirement, I mean, they probably would have had $400,000 to $500,000.
Yeah, sure.
At their retirement. So
conservatively speaking,
it certainly makes a difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so wrapping things up, David, here, can you give our listeners a way to get in touch with you? And not only that, is there, you talked about the two or three different, main categories of people that actually approach you to get, to obtain your services. But what would you suggest as far as the average dentist that thinks there might be a problem, or wants to maybe partake in that prophylaxis that you were talking about, maybe just checking to make sure, giving them peace of mind that things are okay? What do you suggest as far as contacting you?
Well, the first thing I'll mention is we have a great tool available through our online store, and it's called our Embezzlement Risk Assessment Questionnaire, and it's about a 30-question questionnaire that's designed to let a doctor know what level of risk they're facing from embezzlement. And I'll give you the address in a minute for where they can get this. It's available for purchase on our store. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it's a great diagnostic tool before somebody commits to a full-blown investigation or something that's going to be a lot more money.
Okay.
And our recommendation is that doctors do this every 3 months.
Wow. Okay. Uh-huh.
The questionnaire would take no more than 15 minutes. They get a score at the end, and the score is tied to sort of risk position. So, a score of 20 or less on our questionnaire we consider to be very low risk. Once somebody's scoring over 70, we consider that risk to be extreme.
Okay.
In fact, we've never seen anybody score over 70 when they weren't being embezzled from.
Really? Okay.
And I got a call a couple of weeks ago from somebody who scored 108.
Out of how many?
I think the highest possible score in the questionnaire is 170.
Okay. Wow.
But 108 is a raging inferno.
Sure. This is somebody that obviously obtained your services?
They did.
Okay.
and it was the right thing to do. There was just very little chance that nothing was going on. I mean, you have a thief who's acting in almost every way like they're stealing.
Wow.
So that's a great and inexpensive tool. You can get it on our electronic store. Our website is www.dentalembezzlement. And I won't spell that, but if your readers aren't sure, they should check. There are two Z's. Dentalembellsment.com, okay. And if they go to our main page, there's a link that'll take them right to the store.
Okay.
So, I'd encourage somebody if after this interview they're a little bit scared about what might be going on in their office, to take the questionnaire, see what the score is, and then decide if getting in touch with somebody is a good next step.
Great.
And we're very happy for somebody who takes the questionnaire and wants to phone us and discuss it. We'll always chat with them for a little while about their results and again help them determine whether they have a problem.
Right, and you were, just from discussing how your actual company is set up, you're saying that most of this is done virtually. There's no need for any type of travel for either party. Most of this is done virtually and over the telephone.
That's right. Okay. We have worked hard at eliminating the need for an investigator to be physically on somebody's premises, and there are a couple of advantages to that. The first one is cost.
Mm-hmm.
Our investigations cost a lot less than they would if every time we investigated we had to put somebody on an airplane and put them in a hotel.
Sure.
So cost is a big advantage. The second advantage for me is that gives me the latitude to match the best investigator I have with the problem, regardless of geography.
Okay.
So if we have a client California who calls us, and the best investigator I have lives in Georgia for this problem, then I can ask them without going through that exercise of saying, well, okay, but I have another investigator who lives 100 miles down the road from the victim, why don't I send him instead? So by being able to free ourselves from geography, we can match skills and needs much better. And the third thing is stealth. It's very difficult to conduct a stealthy investigation on site.
Right. Good point.
I could try dressing all my investigators as plumbers or service technicians from one of the dental supply companies, but you just can't quietly do an investigation when you've got people on site.
That's true. Okay. Don't want to raise any suspicions.
One of the characteristics of thieves in a lot of offices is that they tend to show up when the office is closed because that's the best time to steal. So from my perspective, there's no safe harbor. There's no time when I can send my investigators physically into an office and say, okay, there's absolutely zero chance that the thief will happen by, and wonder what you're doing there, and I'm not sure you're going to have a good answer.
Right.
So doing this through the cloud is a great all-around solution, and we invested a lot of time and money in making it so we could work that way.
Great. What would be your advice for, say, because we work with a lot of dentists that are acquiring multiple practices or actually purchasing their very first practice. What would be your advice for those types of situations when they're not familiar with the staff yet, but they want to be proactive? Shall they take that questionnaire first? Would that be a good starting point?
The questionnaire is a great place to go. The other thing is if it's possible to background check employees in practices they're acquiring, and I understand that there are some challenges with that. Mm-hmm. But if that's possible in a given situation, I'd certainly encourage it. And again, I'll go back to my comment that serial embezzlers are a minority of embezzlers, but at least background checking will help you identify that group. And I guess the third thing I'd say, Mark, is that every dentist needs to have the mindset that this could happen to them. Right. When I speak at dental conventions, and I tell them there's a 60+% chance that the dentist will be a victim. Invariably, there are 5 or 6 people in the room, and they're sitting there with their arms tightly folded, and you can see a little bit of bruxism happening. And what their facial expression says is, it might be the person to my left and it might be the person to my right, but it won't be me.
Right.
And I've stopped doing this, but I used to call on some of these folks and say, you have that 30% look on your forehead, sir. How come? And they'd have an answer, but invariably it would relate to their situation. In other words, one that we used to get a lot was, well, I am an orthodontist, and really embezzlement is a general dental problem.
Right.
Or I live in a small town, and really embezzlement happens in big cities where people don't know each other very well, and thieves can kind of jump from practice to practice because there's a bit of anonymity.
Sure.
And what I have to say to those people in either case is, no, you get this backwards. Embezzlement happens because somebody who works for you decides that stealing is the best thing they can do. When they do that, they're 100% consumed by their needs and their issues. And they spend no time at all thinking about yours. In other words, nobody says, I'd like to steal, but, I live in a small town, so I can't.
Right.
They don't spend any time thinking about the docket. So, there is no practice that's safe. There's no practice with zero risk of embezzlement. And, any dentist who thinks that their practice is somehow exempt from embezzlement is going to have a problem.
Sure. Well, so having
that would
been
be my strongest piece of advice.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I've been on that side too, standing up on stage and looking out and finding the people that have their arms crossed and it doesn't feel like anything that you say is going to penetrate into their skull. But I usually take it upon myself to try to focus on those people and get them to smile, or without calling them out. But so I know exactly what you mean when you look out in the audience and you do notice those people with that kind of reaction. But listen, David, it's been fantastic. Besides the dentalembezzlement.com website, is there another way for people to get in touch with you, or is that the quickest and easiest way to get in touch with you?
The website's good. I'll give a couple of other ways as well. We have a toll-free number, which is 888-398-2327.
Okay.
888-398-2327. And we're on the East Coast, so that number is staffed during East Coast business hours.
Okay. Gotcha.
The other option, if somebody's got concern, is to send an email to our embezzlement hotline, which is emergency@dentalembezzlement.com. And the significance of that email address is that it's monitored evenings and weekends by an on-duty investigator.
Okay.
So somebody can send an email to that. We've even have them come in on day. We got one on New Year's Day last year.
Wow. Yeah, when you discover something's wrong, sometimes it is an absolute emergency that you get in touch with somebody just to start talking it out.
Yeah. So emergency@dentalembezzlement.com will typically get you the quickest response from an investigator.
Okay. Another question just popped into my head, David, real quick. Have you ever had clients that have used your services more than once, that they've been victimized more than once?
Yes, we have. Not often, but we've had a few. I just wrapped up an remember when I talked about going into my own dentist and seeing the staff member we fired at our office back when I got my start.
Sure.
That dentist retired last year, and just before his retirement, we did another investigation for him and found embezzlement.
Oh man.
So he was he ultimately turned out to be a repeat client.
Right. I mean, when you talk about potentially 80% of all dentists having this issue, it makes complete sense that it could potentially happen more than once in somebody's career.
Absolutely.
Well, David, I'm not going to take any more of your time. That was just a fascinating and completely informational interview. I really appreciate your time. We're going to wrap things up, and unless you had anything else to add?
Not a thing. Thank you for doing this, Mark.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. I am a member, or I am on your mailing list, so I'm constantly fascinated by the information that you put out on a regular basis, and I value it very much. I recommend to anybody that is feeling like this may be an issue in their office, and whether or not they think that it's actually happening, it's probably not a bad idea to get on David's mailing list. I'm sure you could do that by visiting dentalembezzlement.com. David, thank you so much.
Yes,
have a wonderful spring and summertime, and hopefully we will meet at an event someday that we are both speaking at, and hopefully I will not have to call you personally for an investigation, but I know where to go if I get suspicious.
Sounds perfect. Thanks again, Mark, and thanks for the great work you do for dentists.
I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dentalpreneur podcast. I thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Dentalpreneur podcast. Check out TrueDentalSuccess.com for full recaps of every show, a schedule of our live events, free video tutorials, and a whole host of practice building resources.